Slot grill, also has those rounded headlamps, typical Jeep stuff. So where is this 7-slot grill coming from?
You know, 7 continents?
7 continents. Yeah, we love to say that. It's actually not true, but it is a cool story. I like it. Customers would love it. And I tell you the real story of it, which is not as exciting. So actually, sometimes sad.
Copyright.
So basically, what we have is the 7-slot grill. We used since 1945, actually late 1945, and before that it was a slightly different grill. Remember on the Willys MB, the original military Jeep was actually 9 slots. And the thing is, actually some of them were cut down to 4 depending on what kind of accessories they were running up front. But ideally, I'll just bring you back in time, so that'll give you actually a little bit of history so you can tell your customers or just have fun with it in conversations among friends. So basically, the Jeep grill, it started, actually Jeep was not even a brand. If you remember back then, it was Willys Overland that was asked to bid the American government on a lightweight military vehicle. So GM, Kaiser, Ford, and Willys Overland all bidded to win that little thing that it would build for the World War II. And then Willys Overland won the bid. So the grill originally was more like a flat piece made of steel bars. It was like what we call a slat grill. So it was the original grill for the Willys NB. So picture like a fence, you know, with flat bars all welded together at the top by a fabricator. So they started building those, and in the war effort, even though Ford, Kaiser didn't win the bid, they were still asked to supply those vehicles to the American military. In the war effort, they were all making the same vehicle, pumping them out, sending them to Europe. So Ford, when they saw that grill from Willys, they say, it looks really cool, it looks really rugged, and this is what the kind of grill we had on pretty much any military vehicle back then. They say that's too expensive to make. We want to make it cheaper. So what we're going to do, we're going to use a flat piece of steel, or basically a flat sheet of metal, and we're going to stamp it with a die with 9 slots and 2 holes for the headlamps. And they started slapping those in the front end, and it proved actually to be so much cheaper that even Willys MB by 1942 started using those grills as well. So the grill you see with 9 slots and the tiny round headlamps, the military Jeep face that you see everywhere is actually made by Ford. So it's kind of sad. I hate to use the F word in front of you guys, but anyway, the thing we have here is 7 slots. So what happened to those 9 to 7 is in 1945, we wanted to actually sell those at the end of 1945, at the end of World War II, wanted to sell those to civilians, hence the name CJ2A, which was the first model, the CJ for civilian Jeep. And to actually meet requirements for regulations for headlamps, we had to change the headlamps a little bit. Do you know why the original Jeeps had, the military ones, had the headlamps as deep as this, like super deep in the nose and tiny? Do you know why they had 3 reasons for them?
Wouldn't get blown out. Destroyed.
Sorry?
They wouldn't get blown out by shrapnel.
A shrapnel, or maybe like rocks, or even branches when you go through. Yeah, that's one of them.
To help direct light as well?
Help direct light, meaning if you're traveling a convoy at night, actually German bombers wouldn't see you except from head on. So basically, if they're at any angle, they wouldn't see any light coming on from the vehicles. We used to call them convoy lights, and you have those convoy lights also on top of the fenders. So that's the second reason. The third reason why they were so deep here is because they were mounted on a swiveling system. So you open up the hood, you swivel them back, and then you light up the engine bay, so you can work on, the engine. So that was actually the idea. So in 1945, we wanted to sell those to North Americans. We had to push the headlamps out and make them bigger to meet the DOT regulations. What's going to happen to this slot? Disappear. So we went from 9 to 7, and this is how we ended up with 7-slot grill. And the Jeep name also appeared. Before 1945, the Jeep name was just a moniker. It was just basically a little surname or a little nickname that we gave to the vehicle. And do you know where it comes from, the Jeep name? There's different actually theories. American Army actually would say Jeep, like, because Ford, when they market them, there's GPW. Ford, it would write G for government, P for, people thought it was purpose, but it was for 80 inches wheelbase. And they would put this on the wood crates before they shipped them to Europe. So like Jeep. Or another theory, which I think is the most interesting one, is that the kids, because literally these guys were kids, they were 15, 16, 17, and 18 in the trenches. They were at war, didn't have iPads, didn't have radios, didn't have TVs to entertain themselves, so they had comic strips. And they were reading back then Popeye. And Popeye had one character in that comic strip that was called Eugene the Jeep. And Eugene the Jeep was able to disappear, was half dog, half mystical person, character, and it would actually stick to walls, climb all the way to the ceilings, get to be invisible, and it was actually a really cool character. And people started to say, well, this little Jeep does everything Eugene Jeep does, and this is what it was called. So it went from a nickname to actually the second most recognized brand in the world. After Coca-Cola, you can go over those 7 continents and ask anyone there, like, do you know Jeep? Everybody knows Jeep. Even if we don't sell Jeep in that country, they call any small SUV a Jeep, like a Mitsubishi Pajero, a Jimny from Suzuki, whatever they call it, a Jeep. It's funny. So it's the second most recognized brand coming out of a nickname. So now you have the typical Jeep face. The Jeep face also has a snap crease design over here, which is also found on the JL, which is also found on which other model? On the YJ. That was the first Chrysler-made Jeep in 1987. Actually, we made some in Brenton, actually, in Ontario. That snap crease you see here also provides some rigidity to the plastic grille. Why is it plastic? Because it doesn't rust. You can ask any TJ, YJ owner, or any Jeep from the metal grille era. They all complain that it rusts. The fenders rust. That's why they're made of plastic. When you went outside earlier today to see that pole, probably saw my TJ out there with crazy rust on the fenders. Those fenders were actually fine a year ago, and then they started bubbling like crazy. That was an issue we had on all Jeeps. So now fender flares are made of plastic, lighter and more efficient. So the bumper is made of steel. This is not the standard bumper. It is the winch ready bumper. So why winch ready? I can remove those. Plate goes off, I pop this out, and I can install my winch with a fair lead up front. So that will look a little bit like the Power Wagon behind you. Then also, it is great for off-roading. I can undo the extensions over here at each end and expose the tire. So when I'm going off-roading, I don't want rocks to hit my bumper, I want them to hit my tire, so this way I can climb over those rocks. So that increases what we call the approach angle. Approach angle is measured from the ground up, from the tire touching point, straight to the front of the bumper. So you see we have a very steep angle. If you look at Toyota, you look at GM, the angle is way less. Why? Because they have a longer overhang. This one, we push the tires on the corners. Another advantage of the steel bumper, obviously, it's durability, but it might rust. So that's why normally we have a steel bumper with a plastic cover on it, just like we do on the S and on the Sahara model, or not Sahara, but the overhang. So now, behind the bumper, you won't see it well here, but there's a shiny aluminum piece, so like kind of silverish piece here. And this is the disconnecting system for the sway bar. So let alone disconnecting it, but what is a sway bar for? Or you can call this anti-roll bar, which pretty much says what it is. Yeah, it prevents the vehicle from rolling over, not just necessarily this, but it's more like it prevents the suspension from moving too much when you're going around a turn. For example, if you're driving in a very high center gravity vehicle like this, and you're driving left, you probably notice there's a shift in the weight, or the weight transfer happening in the body, and then the body kind of leans towards the outside of a turn, like a boat a little bit, you know, when you're turning with a boat. So you want to avoid this. The way to avoid this is we have a bar. Every single car in the world has a front sway bar, and it attaches the front part of the suspension, it goes along the way across the frame, and it goes to the other side. And by torsion resistance, it will prevent that body roll, because the more body roll you have, the more resistance from the torsion of the bar happens. What we want to do off-road is disconnect it. So in my old Jeeps, I have to crawl in the mud, then get the cutter pins out, and then it gets disconnected. This one, it's a flick of a button. So I just push a button, then it gets disconnected. If I reach over 29 kilometers an hour, it will try to reconnect itself. Because you're reaching a speed, that's the threshold where the speed gets a little too quick to actually handle corners without a sway bar. So we'll start to reconnect. When I say start to try to reconnect, is if you're on uneven pavement, those splines from the two ends of the bar, because they're being disconnected now, they're trying to reconnect, but if it doesn't match perfectly, it won't reconnect. So that's why you need to be normally driving on a smooth surface for it to reconnect. But over 29, it will try to reconnect. So you have the disconnecting sway bar. You have the front trail cam. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. The hood is made of aluminum. Why? Because it sits high in the chassis, so better center of gravity, lower center of gravity, because if it was a heavy piece, that would raise the center of gravity. So made of aluminum. It's also because I have to open it. So if I have to open it, and by the way, this is the way to do it, just so you look very comfortable in front of your customers. You do the driver's side first, you do the passenger side after that, but you do it just in a single motion to click them open. If you open them slowly, it will stay hooked like this, and then you have to push down on the hood and whatever to pop the hood open. So I'm going just to open this. and it's made of aluminum, so it's very light. The prop rod, just a little side note, when you get it out of its place, pull towards the engine, not towards you. Otherwise you're going to break that little yellow clip, which is probably back order already. So so basically this is your prop rod. You probably notice this is a Pentastar engine, 285 horsepower, 260 pound-feet of torque, that the engine brain, the ECU, the computer, sits really high in the chassis. Same thing for the air intake, which we take the fresh air for the engine, and the alternator is all very high. Why is that? Water fording. So how many inches of water can I ford with this? More than that. 30, yeah, 30 inches of water. So those tires are what, 33? They're never really 33. It's typical advertising stuff. So it's almost to the top of those tires will be 30 inches. So like pretty much here. Okay, so this is how much tire, how much water you can water ford every day going to work. So let's say you want to live on a small island, you want to go through 30 inches of water every day. You better not be in a hurry though, because it's at 3 kilometers an hour maximum. Why? If you go faster than this, there'll be a swell building up on the front of the vehicle, and that will eventually end up in the engine, so you don't want that. Also, you probably noticed the alternator, just like the JL Wrangler, the alternator is turned around. It's facing backward instead of facing forward like all the other Pentastars. Why? Because we protect the bearings. So the bearing facing forward, if you go through water, if you go through mud, normally water will rush inside the alternator, so we flipped it around. It also helps with the e-torque system we offer on the 2-liter system as well. So now, let me just close this up, and those are called the lunchbox latches. So we like this because it's a positive lock, unlike the older JK. The JK would have basically a rubber tie down here, and that would stretch and move when you drive on the highway. Why? Because the air would build up right under the hood, push the hood upward, and this thing would start moving on the highway. A lot of people got like scared by driving those on the highway. There's no way it's going to pop open, but it's like an uncomfortable feeling. So we made those. And if you have kids, you know what we call lunchbox latches, because kids have the same thing for their lunchboxes. But also on the side here, on the fenders, you have those openings that will bleed off the extra air pressure. And also the hot air coming out of the engine compartment bleeds off from there. The fender is made of plastic. Have you noticed on the Rubicon, the fender lines up with the opening of the hood. If you look on the Overland or on the Sport S, it's about 2 inches lower. So now you understand why I can put 35s on this and not on the Sport S or the Overland. It's just in the fender. Suspension has nothing to do with it. So it's not a higher suspension, whatever. It's just the fender. If you put those fenders on the other guy, you put 33s on it, and this one you can put 35s. So without changing a thing besides tires on this thing, you can put 35s all around, including the spare tire. So the spare tire, you can put a full-size spare tire that is 35 inches in diameter without changing a thing. On the other guy is 33. This one 37 when I put the 2-inch lift, and the other one 35 with a 2-inch lift. From the yeah, it's bolt on. You can take this and bolt them on the other guy. So the other thing is, since we're speaking tires for now, have you had any questions at the dealership? People saying, Falcon, Wild Peaks, you know, I'd like to see some BF Goodrich, I'd like to see some Duratrack Goodyear tires. I like those. You probably heard about this. Like, people's like, what's Falcon? Can someone tell me what is Falcon?
Excuse me?
Yeah, it's an eagle. Yeah, it's a bird of prey. No, it is actually, Falcon is a Japanese company. It's called Sumitomo. So Sumitomo owns Falcon. Falcon is basically their sporty brand for tires. They do sponsor drifting, they do sponsor road racing quite a bit. And Falcon, being Japanese, they used to actually own Dunlop World, and it was actually a merger with Goodyear. And when they split from Goodyear, they kept Dunlop World, but not North America. Goodyear kept North America, because Americans, they think the center of the world is America, so they just, we just need to keep Dunlop America. So they kept Dunlop America. That said, in the deal, when they split from Goodyear, they also got the assembly plant, or basically the factory, built in Buffalo, New York, where we make those. So it is a Japanese company established in 1910, which is Sumitomo Tires, that owns Dunlop World and also owns Falcon Tires. So it's a great company, great quality. And right now in the business, those are the best off-road tires. You can get them in all terrain or mud terrain. When I'm saying the best, they're not surpassing grip, like they're not so much better. They're pretty much all equivalent in off-road grip, but it's the mileage you get out of those is much better than the Duratrax, much better than Duratrax, and better than the BF Goodrich All-Terrain. Why? Because these are the only ones that offer in the aftermarket when you buy them, they offer a mileage warranty on them, which is normally not something you get out of off-road tires. So good tire, Japanese tire, made in the US. Not all sizes made in the US, because different factories are building different sizes, but this is the idea. Okay, now let's move to the side here. Let me just push this down. Can you drive like this? Legally? Legally, no. Legally, yes. You can, actually. If you got a ticket, you can fight it. The thing is, you have to wear sunglasses or goggles, which kind of look crazy, or just glasses. As long as you have eye protection, you can drive like this. The only thing you have to do, though, is you have to attach the windshield to the hood. So we have a Mopar bracket that goes in the hole here, it goes around and attaches to the hood.
Does it come with the car?
No, you have to actually order it. It's through Mopar. So your service parts and parts and accessories guy will know that. Yeah, probably. You can make your own using a tie down. So okay, so this is it for it. This is made of aluminum, by the way. So it's white because it's not structural. You know, everything that is made of aluminum is easier to remove, easier to open, and it's not structural. What's structural is this piece. Okay. So now, if I had the front camera, it would be over here, not the trail cam, but for forward collision warning, we have a camera that goes here, and we also have an optional radar that goes here. Okay, so those technologies would need to be covered. So if I drop this down, in the kit with the vehicle comes like a plastic cover. The plastic cover goes over here to basically protect it from mud, because you don't want to have mud flying in your camera that will actually be used to activate the brakes or deactivate the brakes in the case of a collision.
How many bolts you take the windshield down?
Four, and actually 1, 2, 3, 4. Where you see that little silver piece here, like this is where the bolts are. Yeah. So very easy. Those are T30s, and it comes with the kit. So let me show you a little more stuff. So let's go down here. You can go on each side of the car. You can pop doors if you want. You've seen here already. There's no need to go too far on this. I just want to highlight the fact that we won the Pendas interior with this interior. It's very JL-like. But the switches you see here, there's one thing we don't have in the regular. So you have yes, you have the switch in the Rubicon to go from front to rear locking dips. You also have the disconnecting sway bar. You have the 4 accessory switches when, let's say, you add a light bar, you add onboard air, you add a winch. Anything electric could be installed using those switches. So how do you attach the system? Is you wire everything to the fuse box, and there's wires dangling from the fuse box. You just attach the wires to it, so you don't have to tap in the wiring harness. Because like I said earlier, if you're more butcher than electrician, you might void your entire warranty on your vehicle when you start tapping the electric system. So what you have is those 4 switches. If I want the switch to be on when I push once and I push twice, then it's on. Or if I want it on as long as I hold it, and then it's off when I release it, all this can be changed in the Uconnect system. So you can change all the switches properly. The off-road plus button. Right by the sway bar button, there's an off-road plus button. What does it do for you? It's unique to the Gladiator. Have an idea? No. Actually, what it does, it allows you to lock the rear axle at high speed. So normally you're down to 4x4 low to be able to lock your axle. Well, this one you can be in 4 high and drive up to 120 kilometers an hour in four-wheel drive high or lock the rear end. So if you want to do some Baja racing, if you want to do some kind of a free runner type of off-roading, you can do it. So this is very popular in the sand as well, because Rubicon with the 410 gears, so they have 410 gears. I'll be question later, 410 gears, and the 4 and 4 row, they have a 4-to-1 ratio as well. This is too low to go in the soft conditions. Like in the mud, it's great for rock crawling, but for mud, for sand, it's still too low. So using high speed 4 high with the locking bit helps you, especially in soft sand. Okay, so what we got here, let's talk about the back of those seats here. So let's just move down here. And by the way, this is the toolkit that comes with the vehicle, just like the Wrangler. There's a T30, there's a T50. This is a socket for your wider harness. Okay, so at the back here of the seat, there's a webbing or like a weaving little thing here. So it's not basket weave. Can someone tell me what it is? There's an acronym for it. It's in your book sometimes.
Yep.
No, that's very popular these days, but you can actually put your pouches and hand patches actually in there. The thing is, it's called MOLLE. So MOLLE is basically an acronym. It's a military acronym. So basically, it's a MOLLE is like a optional lightweight luggage and equipment. And basically what you do is you weave your equipment or basically your accessories to this. It started in the past, it was on the seat covers, and then we had also inserts you can put inside the tailgate of a JL or a JK, and now we implemented this on the back of the seat. So the way it works is really easy. Normally you have an accessory. Whoop, I lost something? Okay, that's okay, I'll go get it later. That's a T50, probably went fire. So basically, if you buy a duffel bag, you know, a military duffel bag, you buy tactical gear, it comes naked, it's just a bag, and it's covered with MOLLE. So MOLLE like this is like that webbing here. So to attach pouches, accessories, mag lights, hatchet, bottle of water, anything, you have this little system. This one is a little short. You know, it was not for you to put on your belt and look good at the dealership with your flip phone. Okay, it is actually something that goes and gets weaved in. So normally what you do, when the little strap over here is a little longer, it goes under, over, and under, and then you snap it. So you go under, I'll go only once for this one because it's a bit short, and then you snap it in place. So like that. And then, okay, so now that I lost that little, there we go. So there we go. So now it's in place, and then it's not going to move away. So I can have like bottle of water, anything, could be like a multi-tool, anything attached to the back of the seat.
Doesn't fall out the door.
Huh?
It doesn't fall out the open door.
No, it doesn't fall out the open door this way. So now, let me just pop this open, and you can do the same on your side. Inside here, you notice some people like to call this a rifle case, because technically it was designed initially for a firearm, because you can lock it. You can also remove the dividers if you do it on your side. And the mat at the bottom you can lift. There's 2 bolts under each. So once you undo it, there's a handle over here. So you grab this and you put it in your house to keep it secure. You can put fishing rods, you can put tools, you can put tow ropes, anything you want, and you can remove it or leave it in the vehicle. All models comes with it. Yeah. So basically you have, another thing you have is this. So this little tray for your bolts, for your doors, roof, windshield, everything goes in that tray. And on the cover, it's like a fuse box. So basically it shows you what goes where, how many bolts of which, and this is where these go. So you don't lose anything. On the JL, that'd be at the back of the Jeep. So you keep it here. So now, it is a lockable space, but if I have, let's say, something expensive that I want to keep behind the seat, I can lock it in place. So now I'm moving the seat, but if I want, I can lock it in place. There's a little keyhole on top of each seat, and I can lock it in place. So once it's closed, no one can pull the strap and get it down. So I can put like expensive stuff right here. I can put stuff behind. And on your side, you have, if you don't mind just pulling quickly, and you pull once, that's okay. You just pull once, and then you get the speaker up. So yeah, it's a 2-hand thing. There you go. So the latch is done with that nylon strap, and then once it's done, you just undo it by hand. You press here to turn it on.
Bluetooth.
Yeah. Okay, so it's turning on, so it's a Bluetooth speaker. So the cool thing with the Bluetooth, it's 300 watts, it's stereo, but there's 2 speakers in it. It's actually waterproof. It charges using those charging points, and also plays music when it's in place. And once it's out, it will sync with your phone, it will sync with your iPod, whatever is using Bluetooth. The cool thing is if you're at a cottage, you don't have a radio, you leave this in the kitchen, for example, you pop this open in the back, and you have all the connectors for, like, let's say, a generic MP3 player, charging system, so you can leave it plugged in the house for the weekend, and then you take it out when you go. And it's pretty loud. I tell you, it's at 300 watts, and I can play it a little bit later. It's very loud.
Does it charge automatically?
It charges automatically when you leave it in place. And to put it back, you're gonna make sure you don't. That's it. Yeah, this way.
Whether
And
the vehicle is on or not, it charges.
well, it has to be. Well, the vehicle has to be on.
The vehicle has to be on.
Well, the
for
vehicle
that
has to be
charge.
on. Yeah. So you can't just park it and let it charge. So you have to have the optional Alpine system. You don't have the Alpine system, you don't have it. So the other thing that is pretty cool with it is, like I said, to buy an equivalent, basically as loud and as high quality, you'd pay roughly $500-600, you know, in the aftermarket. So like a JBL or anything like this, it's like $495 or $500. So it is good value to actually have it added, but don't lose it. This is why we suggest to lock that little back seat. Otherwise, as soon as the word comes out on the street, people will try to reach and steal them. Because technically, I can just plug it in a wall. You know, I don't need a Jeep for it. So yeah. So let me just put this back up.
You were talking just a minute ago about key to lock that.
Yeah, here.
What key?
The actual key.
From? Okay.
Yeah. So it goes over here.
Glove box.
Yeah, and then like that. It's locked. That's it. So, and there's a space for that key. Remember, it goes in the middle here. Huh?
Phone fits in there too.
The phone fits in there too. So let's move down. By the way, this is made of steel. The body's made of steel for the cab. The fenders are made of aluminum.